Hello, everybody. Hello. How's everyone doing? It is windy and overcast, and it's been rainy, and it's just kind of like one of those days. But we are approaching the Thanksgiving holiday, and this is during a time and a season that is different for everybody. We're all on the same boat as far as that goes. And a lot of people want to congregate. A lot of people are frustrated because they can't gather together, and they want to be respectful of everyone, multi-generations, and just protecting their loved ones. And other people are together and want an escape, but there's nowhere necessarily to escape to. Some people are dealing with loss. Some people are actually really looking forward to the holiday. But wherever you find yourself, whether you are alone, whether you are mourning, grieving, whether you are looking forward to the holiday, one of the things that I can encourage you to do before I even dive into what we're going to talk about today, this is just on my heart, so I know someone needs to hear this, is to sort of just play through the experience or the day of before it even happens. A lot of times we can deal with some anxiety or some what I call future tripping, which is just visualizing the future without God, visualizing worst case scenarios, visualizing how it's not going to be a good experience, visualizing how it's going to be negative or impact you in a way that is not positive, right? So rather than doing that, a lot of us have gotten really good at playing out those scenarios. Rather than doing that, give yourself some space to journal, to feel what you're feeling, to think about what you're thinking about, to be prayerful, to be intentional, and to come up with a plan for before that time happens. So a lot of people get work off. A lot of people are probably going to be staying home. So how can you think through and really bring some intention to what those few days could look like, whether it's Thanksgiving, Black Friday, even the weekend? How can you really support yourself? If you're alone, if you're going to be around people, what is it that you genuinely need? What is it that you feel like you're missing? What needs to be communicated, revealed, expressed? Where are you at? So a simple journal exercise, literally just open to a blank piece of paper and write down your thoughts about Thanksgiving. Just like, where are you? What are you feeling? And then write down what do you need? Because sometimes we don't even actually explore that. How can you really be grateful? How can you bring intention and gratitude to this space, no matter what it looks like? Because God says that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And that's not just like a hit of motivation. That's actually, whether I'm single, whether I'm married, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Whether I'm alone or whether I'm surrounded by many people, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Whether I'm sad and grieving or anxious, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? Whether I want it to be some kind of way, and I know it's not going to happen that way, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So just being able to get it out is so important. Being able to really honor and respect where you're at, and then also be able to have some intention around what that looks like. So I can just share from my personal experience. So I have family that's kind of all over the place. I actually haven't gathered with family for a holiday maybe in 3 years, which is insane, right? So there's not been a structure, there's not been a tradition, there's not been that sense of can't wait to see you, I'm so excited. And there was a little bit of that forming this year. And then right when it was about time for people to travel and for people to get together, there was a whole bunch of fear that was brought up, a whole bunch of pressure, and people just decided to not have everyone gather, right? So that was interesting to process with everybody, to be really honoring, to be really respectful and go through. But I also had to intentionally pull myself back and do the very things that I'm telling you to do. What is it that I need? What makes me sad? What am I longing for? What can I be grateful for? How can I intentionally make the most of this time? And so then thinking through things that are exciting, like there is this beautiful lake that I love. There's several of them here actually, but one of them is sort of close to downtown, and I haven't gone around there in a long time. It's beautiful. It's just so refreshing. So I'm looking forward to doing that on Thanksgiving because I have a lot of more time that day than I would, right? So I like reconnecting with nature. I like spending time with God. I like feeding on a sermon. So all of those things are possible, and those are all good for my soul. So those are all things that I'm going to intentionally do. And then there are some folks that I can connect with. We can kind of do like a potluck style meal with, disposable plates, forks, all the things, and our masks, right? Because sometimes you choose family, right? And that's just as powerful. So creating space for myself, creating space to connect with God, creating space to get out in nature, creating space to connect with people in windows that make sense, and just being really intentional, sending cards to people and letting them know how I feel, even if my presence can't physically be there. And volunteering and providing meals and resources to people in need that really are in a place of perhaps greater need than I am, and getting out of my own way and less focus on self and more on giving. So those are all things that I did. But I did also want to acknowledge my emotional needs, my heart needs, and my need for that intimacy and connection. And so that's why it was so important to place those things in my life, to initiate those things, because I know that my soul needed it with me. So what I mean by that too, when you've gone so long where you haven't had family or a home base, that can become a norm, but we are never meant to operate that way. And so sometimes we have to recognize that and then initiate connection, because people can't always read our mind. It's not that it's not available. We just have to recognize what the need is and then be available for it to come together in a way that is greater than we can think or imagine, because that's what God promises. He promises to give us the desires of our heart, and he promises to do far greater than we dare ask, think, or imagine. But some of that is being real and getting clear on where you're at so that you can be available for God to answer those desires. Makes sense? So hopefully that's helpful. But I know that particularly to release anxiety and to really enjoy that time and just receive the blessing of what it is, no matter what the outcome is, it's important to be proactive before things like this happen, okay? Especially when it's a time where it's glorified for togetherness and family and all of that. And if you don't have family and you're not often together, it can feel really awkward. So, couple of recaps. One is journal everything that's on your mind when you think about the holiday. 2 is really identify what are your needs or what do you feel like you're lacking. And then come up with some plans and intentions to make sure that you get those needs met, because at the end of the day, we need to prioritize our own needs and make sure that those get met. And then also be prayerful about how God wants to fulfill these desires that you have, or how you can be of service to other people so that in a strange way, your needs do get met. Make sense? All right. So that was just bonus. I hope that was helpful to somebody. But I really wanted to walk through this thought that, and I'll explain or kind of like back into how I got here. But if all you had to offer other people in your world was friendship, who would still be in your life? If all you had to offer people in the world was friendship, who would still be in your life? Now, I found this really interesting. I don't know how this happened. I haven't done this for years, but I was led to the other day to literally go into my contacts and clean out people that I didn't recognize, right? That I just like randomly put in my phone, or people that were seasonal and the season changed, right? What is that phrase? Some people are in your life for a reason, for a season and a lifetime, right? So some people that were in my life just for a season were in my phone still. And it's like, we're not connected on social media. We're not up to date with each other's lives. See what I'm saying? So I was led to go through and clean out contacts, literally remove people from my phone, remove people that I'd given access to that maybe in some ways proved that they don't deserve that access, which can feel weird, right? But I cannot tell you how cleansing that was, how restorative that was, how much of a lift that brought. And it brings a lot of clarity too, because when you look at these contacts, who was in your life because they were adding to it and it was reciprocal, and who was in your phone or who was in your life just because you were giving, because It was one-sided because you were initiating all the things with me. So super important to think about, but that's sort of what prompted this. I was prompted to do that. And then I thought, wow, if all I had to offer people in my life was friendship, would they still be in my life? And I came to this because I, growing up, was a hardcore people pleaser, perfectionist, high achiever, like doer, the one that was in the middle, mediating, making sure everybody was good, to the point of my needs not being met, right? So it created this false sense of relationship. I'm only in relationship if I'm useful. I'm only in relationship if I'm contributing. I'm only in relationship if I am helping and serving, right? It's not about me receiving anything. It's just about me giving, right? But if you build relationships that way, you never will find fulfillment in relationship because there's supposed to be an exchange. There's supposed to be reciprocation in most relationships. Now, I will say it's important to distinguish what relationships are. Sometimes you're a sponsor, right? And you're just there to help people walk through and keep them accountable in really hard times. Sometimes you're a mentor and there's just people that you connect with and do life with, right? And that is similar to a friendship. Sometimes people in your life because they're family, right? Sometimes people are in your life because there's genuine friendship and there's reciprocation there. But some people are in your life just to pull on you and just to take from you, and it's not healthy. And so it's really, really important to assess your life. I happened to get into a lot of relationships where I was just giving, whether that was work, whether that was business, whatever it was. I was a giver, but when it came to me having a need, when it came to me walking through something tough, all of the people that were in my life were not prepared to help me or to be there for me, right? And that's really hard, but it's so important to recognize that, because then you show up differently with how you connect with people, with how you navigate relationships, and particularly if these are more close or intimate relationships, right? How much you invest in them or how quickly you move in them, right? It's so important to be able to understand divine connections versus just connections. There is a huge difference. So this question is powerful. If all you had to offer is friendship, who would still be in your life? If you're just a friend, if you're not going to enable somebody, if you're not going to fund whatever it is that they need help with, if you're not going to just be there to give them advice, if you're not just going to be there just to like listen to them vent all the time, right? If all you had to offer was friendship, who would still be in your life? Powerful, because it really is a wake-up call. I know in one season that was really hard to look at because I was like, wow, I've built a lot of relationships, but these are not healthy. They're actually dysfunctional because they're one-sided, right? And I personally cannot go through some really high times, low times, and everything in between with one-sided relationships, right? So I really had to pull back and do some reflection and take a look at how am I building relationships? What is the foundation that my relationships are standing on? How am I communicating my expectations, my boundaries, right? What standard am I operating by? So a really clear example was when I was a unbeliever to when I became a believer, right? So didn't have a relationship with God to had a relationship with God. I just had so much more wisdom. I had so much more clarity. I had so much more revelation and discernment on who God sent and who God didn't, and who I was truly designed to be in relationship with, who I was meant to speak into, like just the different types of relationships without the anxiety, without the obligation, without the fear, just truly God-sent relationships that were really beautiful. But that required letting go of a whole bunch of relationships that God didn't send, that God wasn't in, and that were unhealthy. And that was really hard because that meant a season of loneliness, or a season of isolation or consecration, or a season of just a lot of unknowns, but feeling alone, right? And sometimes when we're alone, we think that we're off the path. But when you are walking with God, it's a narrower path, but it's a deep path. And just because you feel lonely, or just because you feel afraid, or just because it seems challenging, doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path. it probably means that a lot of things need to be released from your life so that you can create space and really focus on what's aligned and what's true and what's right for you, right? Because the more deeply rooted you get in purpose, the less people can actually come with you. It's weird, but that's also important to recognize. So I invite you to think about that. If all you had to offer is friendship, who'd still be in your life? Because I think there's a ton of wisdom and power in you recognizing that, so that you are not overcompensating, so that you are not trying to prove yourself, so you are not trying to just give so that you can be worthy of receiving love, so that you can actually look at some limiting beliefs and some limitations that have been messing up how you do relationships. Okay. Now, some other points before I sign off today. One is that we are in a very significance-driven culture, and social media has helped increase that. Now we hear about narcissism all the time, but this obsession with self and self-focus and self-discovery and self all the things, right? But the original intention is service. It's not supposed to be so focused on self. Like, to some degree, yes, you have to have self-awareness. You have to have self-mastery, self-discipline, self-control. There are some self things that are necessary, but the preoccupation with self, the glorifying of self, the keeping yourself above your calling maybe, or above service, or leaning on your own understanding, or getting caught up in your ego, or all this extra stuff actually clouds the mission. So when you think about that just for your own life, sort of like a litmus test, how much am I focused on self and how much am I focused on service? So another way to back into this, I've coached a lot of folks that are talking about how they want 1,000 likes on each photo that they post on social media. And I thought, okay, question, what if you only had 200 likes on the photo, but 15 people bought your book and 20 people registered for your event, right? Like, define significance, define what it is that you're actually after. And sometimes it's shallow, right? Like, sometimes it's, well, I just want to have more people engaging on my post. Well, that's great, but how many people are actually engaged in your work and in the message and in the process of transformation and actually putting into practice what they see from your post? Like, which one at the end of the day is connected to purpose, is connected to service? Like, is it truly about having likes? Is it truly having more people following you? Or is that just noise and distraction, right? Like, go deeper, right? Go so much deeper than that. So a way to kind of shift this a little bit: self-esteem and purpose versus significance. So for example, if my self-esteem is high, meaning if I know who I am, if I know whose I am, if I know what my purpose is, and if I focus on serving as I am led by the Spirit, right? Like, if I just submit myself to God and I'm walking in steps of obedience as I'm given them, just taking these inspired actions, significance is what's operating, right? Like, I believe that I'm significant so that I'm not trying to produce significance. With me? If my self-worth, if my self-esteem is to the place where I believe what God says about me, I know who I am, I know whose I am, I know what my purpose is, I know what my calling is, I'm just taking the next step. I don't need to see the whole staircase, right? I'm being obedient, and God created me, so I'm significant. So I don't need to go proving to people how awesome I am. I just need to be focused on service and let that speak for itself. With me? So it declutters your action. It removes this somewhat worthless thinking from your mind, or all of this crazy emotion that we stir up that's motivated by probably the wrong things. Wrong being it's not aligned, right? And the more you make those very intentional and real, purposeful decisions, the less you're driven by the things that ultimately don't matter, right? For example, at the end of the day, all these people that liked your post, they actually care about you? Because you can never trust the crowd. They're so fickle. One day they love you, the next day they're talking about you, the other day they unfollow you and they hate you. Like, you can't build your self-worth, your self-esteem, your mission on that. You cannot. So really digging into what is driving me, what is my motive, what is the most important thing? Because when I am focused on self and self-centeredness and me, I'm getting off the path, right? Because then I'm not clued into who I'm called to serve, what I'm called to do as my service, right? How I can be more impactful in my service. Like I'm getting cloudy, right? Mixture. And the word says this, a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. So one day I'm fighting for significance. The other day I feel like I'm not connecting with anyone. The other day I feel like I'm unworthy, so I need to go DM all these people, right? Like it's messy if we're not clear. So how can you make the shift from self to service? Okay. And being really clear on what your service is and your offer and the ways that you can impact people. How can you shift from significance to checking on your self-esteem and your purpose? Another thing that's really helpful is realizing that everybody can inspire you. There's literally inspiration everywhere. So rather than focusing on judgment, on criticism, on comparison, on jealousy, how can you look through a lens of inspiration? How is this inspiring me? What is God revealing to me through this, right? Like, how can you take moments, especially where you're very alert, you're aware, you're present, to look for inspiration everywhere? All right, so that is really powerful. And then lastly, how can you live your life under God's influence versus your influence? So powerful. Like how, maybe you're there, but how would your life look different if you lived from God's presence under his influence? If you were guided and directed by him, if you sought after him, if you spent time with him every day, if you listened for his voice, if you obeyed his voice, how would your life flow and operate different than maybe what it is now? Would there be less fear? Would there be less anxiety? Would there be less force and pressure? Would there be less manipulation and control? How would your life be different? Would there be more peace? Would there be more contentment? Would there be more inspiration? Would there be more joy? Would there be more expectation? Would there be more hope? Would there be more vision and clarity and insight and wisdom and power and authority? Like what truly is the difference? And then decide what's worth it to you. What's worth it to you? In the grand scheme, what is worth it to you? Because remember, if all you had to offer people is friendship, who would still be in your life? So today, the call, the invitation is to take a look at what is driving you. What is your motive? What is that rooted in? Is it rooted in fear or is it rooted in love? Is it rooted in confidence or is it rooted in insecurity? Is it rooted in lack or is it rooted in abundance? Is it rooted in necessity or is it rooted in favor and blessing, right? Is it rooted in desperation or is it rooted in knowing? Is it rooted in avoidance or is it rooted in boldness and courage and bravery and strength and character, right? It's so powerful when you can actually be still and know. Be still and know God, right? Be still and know who is in control. Be still and know who is the one that controls it all, who is sovereign over it all, who woke you up this morning, who put breath in your lungs, who is guiding and establishing your steps, who formed you in your mother's womb, who started a good work in you is faithful to complete it. Who are you living for? Because probably if you're living for self, if you're living for social media, if you're living for your boss, if you're living for these false securities, false meaning that's not where your source is. That's not where your security comes from, and they become idols, okay? And as you live from that, usually fear, anxiety, insecurity, pressure, control, manipulation, some agenda that you have start to evolve, and that becomes unhealthy and toxic at some point and dysfunctional, right? So again, reminder, who is in your life? Who would still be in your life if all you had to offer them was friendship, was words of encouragement, was some quality time, was phone calls every now and again, was a lunch date, right? Who would still be in your life if all you had to offer them was friendship? Pay attention to that, because who is in your life really and truly matters in terms of the quality of your life. And then just do some self-assessment, right? Because we invited these people into our life, right? We built connection with these people. So it's really important to do some self-assessment work. Am I motivated just by self, me, I? Am I so self-centered and so self-focused that I forgot about service? Am I driven by significance, or do I know that I'm worthy, that I'm significant, and I'm more focused on keeping my self-esteem where it's supposed to be for me to operate effectively, and on walking out my purpose? Am I truly finding inspiration everywhere, or am I just focused on things not working out and things that are upsetting me and things that I'm bothered by? And how can I make some adjustments to live a supernatural lifestyle, to live under his influence? As I say, God's vibes matter. I know that this was a challenge for me because the majority of my life I didn't live under his influence knowingly, intentionally, and God still was there. God still was leading. God still was guiding. God was still providing, which is so, so powerful. And if he was doing it when I wasn't walking with him, imagine how present he is now, right? So that should encourage your heart. But God's vibes matter came from me not knowing God. Who is God? What does God think? What are God's thoughts towards me? What does God's presence feel like experientially? Can I hear God's voice? What is it like to hear God's voice? How does God speak to me? How do I know that that was God, right? God's vibes matter. So what that meant for me is I've made so many other things matter in my life that ultimately in the grand scheme don't matter, right? I've put the opinions of man on such a high pedestal. I put achievements on such a high pedestal. I put a resume on such a high pedestal, right? When who is it that supplies the strength and the resources and all of that? It's God, right? Like through it all, where is all that coming from? It's not me and my best efforts, right? And I'm not working to earn love. So what was I reinforcing? It was so, so important to me, and now to maintain, to scale back and to observe how I'm showing up, observe how I'm operating, observe what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, how I'm behaving, what I'm speaking, what I'm creating, what I'm allowing, what I'm inviting into my life, what I'm tolerating, how I'm contributing, how I'm avoiding something, right? It's so, so important to be very intentional and clear so that you're not basing your worth, your identity, your purpose, any of that in how people show up. It's about being aligned and then moving and operating from that place. And the results will look different when you do that. So hopefully this message is making sense to you and it resonates with you. But I just encourage you to take some time to walk yourself through these questions. And I am willing to bet that you will find some very interesting and some very revealing things. But it is an exercise that is worth it if living an aligned life, a fulfilling life, a supernatural life, a high quality, high vibe life is important to you. There is some work on your side, but it might be different than what you've been doing. So I just encourage you to take a look at that, because my heart, my desire for you is to feel and know that you're significant, that you're worthy, that you're here on purpose for a purpose, that when you're living from that space, life radically changes for you. So yes, I encourage you to maybe go back through this video and write down some of those questions and really challenge yourself to come up with the answers, because this is a personal thing and it's unique to everybody. But I think in terms of just inner peace and contentment, even when we can't always control outcomes, right? Or they don't always unfold the way we expect or in the time we expect, we can still learn to be content in whatever situation or whatever circumstance we're in. All right, guys. Well, I hope this message blessed you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can also copy a link and share this with a friend if somebody is coming to mind. And you can visit julianapage.com for self-mastery work. There's a beautiful course over there. It's 6 weeks long. So, so powerful, and doing a lot of this question and self-discovery and intentional work. There's also coaching programs over there and so many other resources, hopefully to bless you. So